Hi, everyone. My name is Simon. I'm joined today with our TriStech CEO, Denis Gagne. Hi, Denis. How are you
Hi,
doing?
Simon. Hi, everybody.
Excellent. So today our webinar is titled "It Takes All Kind of AI and Humans to Make Good Business Decisions." Denis will do most of the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, anything you want to add to the discussion, please type that in the chat, and we'll either take your questions at the end if like the moment passed, or we will take them as we are discussing. So, Denis, let's start this conversation on AI and humans.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome, everybody. So today we want to basically give you a little bit of a sense of how Trisotech see the movement of AI and how we're recommending to our customer to use that movement. So naturally, uh, it goes without saying, the attention to artificial intelligence came back with the advent of ChatGPT from OpenAI in November 2022, and since then it's just been growing and growing and growing. It's a wave that's hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so this advent of generative AI took everybody by surprise, even the old AI folks like myself that have been doing AI since the 80s. And what it did is it broke the barrier to entry. It made the barrier to entry so much lower for people to use AI. And therefore, it kind of brought into people's mind that time to value must be shorter, and so everybody is jumping in this fray with a goal of time to value, getting value out of AI very rapidly. Now, by now, just about everywhere, business leaders are looking at how this will affect their companies. Governments are looking at about how this will affect society. Should they regulate it? How should they regulate it? Different companies are trying to figure a way to use the AI without giving away all their data and remaining in control of what's going on. And developers are just having a frenzy, experimenting with all kinds of use case with generative AI. It's everywhere. Uh, it's hard to talk to someone without talking about AIs these days. But just recently, in the last 6 to 9 months, a lot of the proponents, the people that brought in the generative AI, are starting to wonder, should we talk about the future of AI, or are we facing the AI future where AI is taking over? So it is a worthwhile question. It's not necessarily the type of question that I'm pondering on a lot, but it is part of our interest in looking at Trisotech on how we approach AI. So basically, the question here is, there's a huge AI wave, and should we ride it? And yes, this is an image generated by AI. It shows the power with just a simple prompt, how it can generate an image that captures a notion that you're trying to present or publish.
And you mentioned, Denis, that you were surprised by the chat GPT coming out, the generative AI movement. Do you think like it's the first small wave that hides a bigger wave that's coming behind that, or?
No, but it is a big transformative moment. Just like the presentation of the iPhone was a big
Mhm.
transformative moment.
Yeah.
Just like before that, the introduction of the internet was a big transformative moment. Although the transformation of the internet didn't seem like there was a spark moment that started it. It progressively grew on us
Yeah.
in the early 90s. Certainly, the iPhone brought in a revolution, and everybody started thinking about communication and interaction in a much different ways. And I think the same is true with generative AI now. It's bringing us to a moment where we are reconsidering how we do business, how we do things, how we interact with the machine.
Yeah. Sure thing.
So naturally, the good thing and the bad thing. So the half full glass is that generative AI has brought all kinds of attention to artificial intelligence, which was, lacking attention for the last 10 or 15 years. not attention from research, because research has been active all along doing amazing things. But business and consumer were not paying attention to AI as much. Now, the half empty glass is that all people think of when you say AI is generative AI, where there are many other kinds of AI that are available that have been proven to be very successful and adding a lot of value to organizations. And suddenly in the conversation, they're getting completely lost. So our recommendation is do not blindly use Gen AI for every single business problem. We've seen too much of that in the last 18 months. People are trying to use generative AI for just about everything. Now, generative AI is great as a generator of information and interfacing with users, but the stochastic approach, we know the limit. There's a limit, and these limits are limiting the kind of use case you can do. And you have to be aware of those limits because it is probabilistic and it's not deterministic. So therefore, as a business using this, you have to pay considerable attention to this.
Denny, am I hearing some criticism on Gen AI? Like, I thought that you had some NVIDIA in your stock portfolio. Are you not believing in Gen AI, or?
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer of it. No, but seriously, generative AI is amazing. It's doing things at a level that we were just dreaming of before. But it is not the silver bullet that will solve all problems. And it is a tool, and we have to learn how to use the tool. And in fact, Gartner is starting to promote this exact idea, saying, well, generative AI, is not effective everywhere. There are very particular places like conversational user interface, excuse me. The user interface and human interaction is great. The content generation is amazing. But when it comes to predicting, forecasting, and doing decisions and intelligence, it's a little bit less of a value, and it may bring some risk to your organization. So you have to find a way to scaffold this or put this into a bigger context.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about highly regulated industries because they do have a particular context that is shared by a lot of industries, but they have a particular context where they're in a context of sometimes life critical risk, like for example in healthcare, or mission critical type of elements like approving mortgages and things like that. And these organizations, they must rely a lot on their personal judgment. So there's all kinds of ways of scaffolding their users and their knowledge workers so that the actual risk is maintained and operated correctly. There's always a fear of litigation in there. Transparency, explainability is a must. You must justify what you do based on your interpretation of the regulation. And those regulations are continuously changing. Plus, for whatever reason, probably valid reason, they still rely a lot on legacy system, probably because the changing of everything is making it really hard for them to follow through.
And also, I think that some regulation are gray in nature, like there are gray area in the regulation and things like that that are left to interpretation, and leaving that to Gen AI is
that's by design. So the lawmaker and the rule makers are making room for interpretation, and it is up to the organization to do an interpretation of these rules within the framework of what the intent is. So that's the base of it. And so you always have to look at how you meet the regulatory requirement to avoid penalties, how you maintain the transparency that is demanding by these regulations, and how you do your monitoring and your reporting. Fundamentally, but just like any other organization, highly regulated organization are looking to increase efficiency. And by doing that, they want to reduce the friction while avoiding the risk, because there's certainly much more risk avert. Maybe that a startup in a new era will want to be more risk hungry and go forward. So at Trizatec, we've developed a methodology and a framework to make sure that you can ensure complete traceability and explainability from the regulation. So starting from the regulation narrative, we work up to a way where you can have this full traceability and explainability. And all the way through, these artifacts in the middle are all business artifacts. So they're facing artifacts so that you can actually see what's going on and control what's going on to lead you to your compliance as desired. So in adopting AI, and whether you're in a highly regulated environment or not, what you have to look at is to develop this AI-driven decision framework so that you can seamlessly integrate AI tools with your human oversight. And that's very important. And the human oversight is a very important aspect in here. So we want to integrate this AI within the workflow of your knowledge worker, but you want to do it in a way that brings efficiency, but that doesn't really interrupt or confuse or complexify the workflow of your knowledge worker. So fundamentally, you want to orchestrate these business decisions by injecting the right kind of AI at the right time within the workflow that is the normal workflow, which is presumably addressing all the regulations and requirements. So TriZetech is promoting what we call decision-centric orchestration, which is basically this capability of orchestrating the decision-making process within the human and AI context. And talking of context, when you're deciding, context is everything. So for example, in my slide here, you can see the previous decision points that were made at branching point, which led us to that particular path through there. And now today we're at this point, and a later decision will take us on different element or branch to different possible outcomes. So the idea is really that the context of how you got to this point is very important because it limits and it guides the next potential. Each of these points here would have a similar tree of branches coming out. So this context is very, very, very important. So how do you build that context? So you go by starting by aggregating data. Once you've done your data aggregation, you're in a situation where you have computable data. So you can do data automation, and we've been doing that for quite many years now. Then you want to use that data in context. And when you have data in context, you have information. And so this information is created by taking your data, providing metadata, context, event awareness, and all this. But then when you take this information and you add task and activity context, role and responsibility, the case management, the orchestration of events, some AI, some decision, then you're working within the workflow and decision automation of the context of this information. Then you can really do the orchestration of knowledge. And that's where decision-centric orchestration become a key factor. But what are good business decisions? Basically, a good business decision is any decision that effectively contribute to the success and the sustainability of your company. It usually involves taking into consideration the current knowledge and information context, doing thorough analysis, and then aligning all this to your goals and values of your organization. So when we're looking at adding AI into all that context, AI augmented decision making, what we want really, our goal is to basically enhance the human capabilities with AI. So we're not necessarily looking at replacing, we're looking at enhancing the capability of our knowledge worker through some collaboration between the humans and the AI, so that we can remain in control and have the human judgment and intuition jump in at the right time within the workflow of what's going on. So when looking at decision making, there's a full continuum between human-based decisions that are made purely by humans, based on their intuition, experience, and their own judgment, to at the other end, decisions that are entirely made by algorithm an AI system, and most of the time they're without any human intervention. So we're talking about real full-time automation here. But in between, there's a series of different levels where we can move from assisted decision making, where we have canvases that will lead to better decision, augmented decision making, where the human is still making the decision, but it's heavily supported and guided by AI or systems, semi-automated, where the decision is basically what we call attended task. That means that all the material is there and the human just gives the go ahead, and then finally fully automated decisions. So in the context of what we're talking here today, when we're saying deciding or decision, we're talking about the notion of selecting between options. And when we're talking about thinking, we're talking about analyzing the context. So you see the importance of that context here is that you're going to make the decision, which is selecting the option, the best option for the best next action, based on the context and analysis of the context that you have. So what kind of decision exists? So fundamentally, we can divide decision into three categories. There's strategic decisions, tactical decision, and operational decision. And most of the focus in rule-based system and decision system have been around operational decision and making them effective and efficient. But we are at the point where we can use the other kind of different decision and support them with AI, and that's what we want to introduce here. So if you look at it and you're taking into consideration the thinking for deciding point of view, your strategic decision are going to be more creative in notion, where when you're doing strategic decision, you want to consider all kinds of aspects, think outside of the box to be innovative and take over some kind of a market. Where when you're doing operational kind of analysis, you want to be more strict, you want to be more critical, you want to be more analytical. So in these contexts, it's pretty obvious that we can start looking at generative AI to support the creative thinking. When generative AI can bring new ideas, explore different possibilities, bring very unique perspectives, and it can get very creative if you ask them for and if you set the temperature correct on your models. Whereas on the operational side, you want to make sure that you're respecting the regulation, the rules, and that you're working in accordance to everything that is laid out. So there, I've called it rule-based decision. It's more the group of what's known as symbolic type of decision, where you have a more structured and transparent rule decision making. So rule-based systems are very good at that. There's other technologies that are symbolic also in nature that gives you that control to make it more informed and unbiased type of decisions that are regulated by rules of what's possible and what's not possible. Now, when you start looking at tactical type of decision, your tactical type of decisions are going to be fundamentally divided, and I'm generalizing here, into outside-in tactics, which are really meant to bring value to the customer, and what we call inside-out tactics, which is really about bringing value to the organization. So depending where you stand, you may adjust your tactics so that you're more focused on what the customer thinks, and a lot of empathy map and customer journey, and really try to take the customer's point of view where you're looking to bring value to the customer. And when you're taking an inside-out tactic, you're very much more operational. You have your KPIs, you have your checkpoint, your control points. You want to make sure all your control points are met. So you're very more value to the organization from that perspective. So again, here, when we're starting to look at value to the customer, generative AI and the family of generative AI type of solutions are very interesting. And I think that's where they bring the biggest value for now, which is all this idea of being able to interact with your customers in a more natural human way, set up according to the preference of your users, adjust the communication, adjust the content that is delivered based on adapting to the personalization of the individual customers. Whereas on the operational side, you want to be more strict and more structured in your decision, because those are the decisions that you're going to have to report and monitor and prove how they adhere to the regulation. And so you want to reduce your risk there, and you want to maintain a high standard of quality and compliance. So that's where, again, this group of technologies around rule-based or symbolic AI are very important and bring value into here. So at TriZetech, we made sure, and this is a poster that we created many years ago. So we've been on that journey for at least 15 years of providing that support with our modeling tool from strategy to operations, outside in and inside out, and providing you with all the tooling to assure that alignment and that methodology that I was referring before in the context of highly regulated organization, is that we have a methodology that will take you through these steps to lead you to where you want, and all the way to automation, whether it's semi-automated or fully automated context. So in summary, what I've been talking about today is to embrace AI, but responsibly. And what that means to me, and what that means for TriZetech, is you want to drive creativity inside of everything you do, but you also want to drive risk out. So in doing the right selection of the right AI within the right context is very important. We're also highly promoting the notion of a co-pilot or an assistant approach, where your subject matter expert or your knowledge workers are in the loop. So take a model where you keep your knowledge worker and your subject matter expert into the loop. But in doing so, make sure, take great care of not increasing the burden on those workers. So the idea is not to add more things for them to do, more things for them to verify, more things, but rather to merge that right into the current workflow. And so process and workflow and case are very important as a general context of when these things should happen. And finally, you should use a diversified AI techniques. So don't just blindly use generative AI for everything. Generative AI completion are amazing. They do great things and they're very useful. And as I mentioned, there's many different use cases where you want to use it. But you should use and explore other AI approach in particular cases where you want to make sure that you remain in control, that you're responsible, and that you're compliant, and that you de-risk what's going on within your organization. So at TriZetech, our infrastructure of our solution allows you to do all these different things. So we have our decision orchestration layer that allows the orchestration of symbolic AI, workflow automation, and case automation, giving you a complete context of things. So you're always acting within the workflow or a case. And we can pull in predictive type of AI, predictive model, structured AI, and we can also pull in generative AI, the AI, the LLMS that everybody are talking about, providing you the capability of building your own framework in your own way, adjusted to your reality, and integrate that with your existing data and within your existing interface or user and customer interactions. So this is the shameless TriZetech plug. So TriZetech offered this decision-centric orchestration. We are decision-centric. We're outcome-driven orchestration. We support decision intelligence. We have a completely drag-and-drop composability, so this notion of low-code, no-code. We offer the business digital twin. We have our digital enterprise graph, which is a semantic graph that captures everything that you do so that you can have explainability of this. Everything is contextualized from your strategy to operation and inside out, outside in. We support low code, no code, and pro code. So we're certainly not saying just low code or no code. We're saying it's all of these approach orchestrated together to bring value. We're model driven, visual driven, everything is a visual interface so that subject matter expert can create their own models, where standard-based TriZetech is a leader and a promoter of standards in many different industries, including many regulated industries such as healthcare and mortgage. We have an API-first approach. We're containerized. The security is built right in, not just added afterthought. We're integrate with everything kind of mindset. We're headless first, which means we fit right into your interfaces. And if you want, we also have dynamic generation of UIs. We're supporting stateful and stateless environment in a fully decentralized, leveraging AI, giving you the flexibility of interaction via different modality. So
that was a mouthful.
yes, it's the shameless plug at the end of the webinar.
Yeah. So for everybody that stayed all the way through the webinar, they were greeted with that shameless plug at the end. I'm looking for some questions. You can ask them in the chat. I did not get any questions during the actual webinar. So we'll give a few minutes, I guess, for people to ask some questions. We still have about, let's say, 3 more minutes on the scheduled time to take on some questions.
So hopefully my message was clear enough. The idea is, yes, we should embrace AI. We should not.
Do you know what, Denis? I think that we didn't turn the chat on. Someone just pinged me saying that we didn't turn the chat on. So I apologize for that. But apparently now the chat is on.
Okay. There we go.
Getting some questions. So clearly my fault. First question, Denis, for you. Will generative AI models be trained to develop business and decision model, e.g., creating DMN using command in English? Like you give it a regulation and it outputs rules and decision models directly.
So there's a lot of research in that direction. It's still research at this time. People have prototypes. TriZetech have prototypes. The challenge we have is that it's twofold. One is that most regulation and most guidelines have within them a lot of room for interpretation, and they have contradictions sometimes, and a lot of times big gaps. So this is the good old automating the cow path. It's basically, well, if you take something that is flawed and you automate this, then you get an automation of the flawed environment. So therefore, I don't think a pure generating from the document will be possible. That's why the TriZetech methodology shows you different steps to get you there rapidly with the support of AI at every step. But there is still human intervention to make sure that, yes, you do get those generated decision models, but you get them that are properly aligned with your own interpretation of the regulation and your own risk thinking, as opposed to just blindly taking. So the challenge is the source, really.
No, clearly I did not have opened the chat properly because I'm getting a lot of questions. So for those asking if the recording and the slides will be available, they will be on the TriZetech website soon. So, and also I think, Denis, we're going to be sending to everybody that registered the direct link to the video and slides, right? Another question quickly, I guess. How do you know when to depend on Gen AI? I think we touched on that a little bit, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, so that was a big part of what the presentation was about, is to apply generative AI in situation where you need creativity and generation of knowledge or images that are scaffolded. So you don't want to throw it into your highly regulated and strict decision making. That there's better ways to do that. But when you're starting to think outside the box, so for example, if I'm trying to make strategic decisions, I want to do a SWOT analysis, or I want to do a market analysis, then I can brainstorm with generative AI. It's going to be a very useful brainstorm co-worker. But I wouldn't suggest generative AI in strong business decisions that impact the future of your organization.
So maybe one last question. We're reaching time. What would be the security risk when AI, well, I'm guessing generative AI, is augmented to decision modeling / DMN? So does it bring additional security risk to what you're creating?
Well, the security risk is depending on how you have your own system infrastructure. So if you're talking about pure security from an IT security point of view, that infrastructure can be within the boundaries and within the regulation that we have. We have SOC 2, we have ISO 27000, we have all kinds of way of guiding security and making sure that everything are efficient and secure. So the decision making it's still within your own firewall, and you would do that. Now, naturally, if you're thinking in terms of, well, will some information be put into the model, and then the model would expose that knowledge externally? Again, it goes with your selection of where you apply these kind of technology. Certainly, you wouldn't have any of that if you're using some rule-based system in certain contexts. So it's really a matter of picking the right AI for the right task.
Right. All right. I think we're a little bit over time. George, I got your message. I'll relay it to Denis. If you have additional questions, we can entertain them. You can contact us through our website, and we can answer additional questions as well on AI integration with decision orchestration. So, Denis, thank you. Very informative webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and talk to you real soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.